Welcome everybody to another episode, a special episode of the Sentinel Report. It is August 20th of 2025. We just had so much stuff to share. We had to do an extra episode, so we hope you will enjoy. We've got some very special guests joining us today. We're going to focus a lot on the economic front today, folks. So much going on, the battle between Trump and the Fed. We've got the great economist Mark Thornton from the Mises Institute joining us to break that down. And of course, the Jackson Hole, Wyoming conclave of the wizards of central banking is coming up here very soon. Mark is going to tell us all about that. We've also got a very interesting individual, host of the Church and State podcast, on to talk about the new Apostolic Reformation. They've been in the news a lot. They're going to be in the news a lot more. And folks, as Christians, I think we need to know a little bit about their beliefs. So Caleb's going to break that down for us. We also have some excerpts from an interview I just did with Congressman Warren Davidson that I think you're going to appreciate, dealing in particular with the Federal Reserve and what's going on there. And last but not least, we have our good friends over at Genesis Gold joining us for some analysis on the latest when it comes to the economy. So stay tuned for all of that. But first, a word from the word. This comes out of James chapter 2, verses 14. It starts with, what good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. And it's a good reminder, folks, true faith produces works. If you have true faith, if you love the Lord, that is going to cause you inevitably, like night follows day, to want to do things for the benefit of your fellow man, for the glory of God. So let's all be about works as much as we can. Now, before we get to the news, and there's a lot going on today, we got a short news segment just because so many guests, but I do want to tell you about our friends at Victory Nutrition International, folks. They've got all these amazing products with a special technology they use to help absorb all the vitamins and minerals. And one of the ones that I really like is called Trim Rocks. Forget the boring pills and the powders and things. This Trim Rocks is like a kind of like Pop Rocks, but far more healthy. A good way to support your metabolism and your energy, all completely natural. So you pop it in your mouth. My kids absolutely love it because, again, it's kind of like Pop Rocks. It features guayusa and green coffee bean. Gives you a gentle plant-based energy lift throughout the day, and also, of course, immune support with camu camu and other things that help support fat burning, blood sugar balance, and steady energy. There's purple tea extract in there to help with natural weight management, help stabilize blood sugar. And folks, you can only get this through Victory Nutrition International. So get over to VNI, V as in victory, N as in nutrition, I as in international, .life/Newman. That's VNI.life/Newman. And when you use the promo code Newman20, you're going to get 20% off your order. So you can try it out and see how incredible it really is. Now, turning to the news, folks, again, a lot going on. I want to start with a big one. This crazy so-called hate crime charge against a Christian businessman. Finally, little bit of justice here. But you had officers from 7 law enforcement agencies, responders from 2 federal agencies, armored vehicles, traumatized children, all for making a historically accurate statement, folks. Truly incredible. It started back in 2022. Washington man Tyler Dinsmore basically pointed the fact that it used to be legal to kill gay people. In fact, homosexuality was punished as a capital offense in a lot of places. And, that you might see that as good. You might see that as bad. Plenty of people see that as really bad, but it is a historical fact. And it is a free country where, in theory, you have the ability to say what you want. But what happened was local leftist groups, Pantifa, all the rest of them came after this guy with a vengeance. At first, law enforcement said, no, there's nothing we can do, right? It's free speech. You can say whatever he wants. These aren't threats. You certainly can't punish him. Well, after all of that pressure, they finally caved and went after this guy with a vengeance. They showed up at his house, a police helicopter raided his house, traumatized his children and his pregnant wife. And now, after a 3-year legal battle, the judge has finally dismissed the hate crime charge against this individual. But folks, that's the situation in America today, right? You say something that the radical left doesn't like, they might just come break down your door. He still owes about $30,000 in legal fees, folks. They're trying to raise money for him. But folks, that could be anybody, right? You say what they don't like, and they will come after you. Now, good news on the legal front, more justice. Federal Appeals Court just ruled unanimously that you're going to nullify MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell's $5 million payment to a software developer who tried to disprove his claims about foreign interference in the 2020 presidential election. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll keep following it, but very, very important news, folks. Now, also, the Swedish Prime Minister in hot water for admitting that he uses ChatGPT to help run the Swedish government. Right? And I bet he's not alone. I bet there are many world leaders who are increasingly turning to ChatGPT for insights. He was speaking with a Scandinavian news site, and he said that he sometimes asks ChatGPT to give him a second opinion when it comes to what he is doing in government. He says, I use it myself quite often, right? If nothing else, than for a second opinion. And folks, that's a pretty big deal that the programmers of these AI systems are now influencing directly government policy. Now, a court in the United Kingdom has ordered the Ministry of Defense to name the soldiers who fathered children in Kenya. These were serving as international peace troops and had babies. And there are some really significant implications for the UN soldiers all over the world who have been raping women and children, and in many cases producing offspring that they have abandoned. We'll stay following this story. Also, folks, big news out of Chicago and Illinois. Chicago has announced that they're going to be expanding their parental replacement centers, as I call them. They disguise them as schools. They're called sustainable community schools. So, it used to be schools would do the academics, parents would do everything else. Now these sustainable community schools, funded in large part by the federal government, they replace parents, they replace voluntary associations, they replace churches, they handle your child's mental health and dental health and well-being and nutrition and you name it. These schools are going to take care of it. And as I was looking into this, I found some pretty incredible stuff, right? The one that they touted as a model, the Richards Academy School in Chicago, one of these sustainable community schools. Folks, they graduated 2/3 of their victims in 4 years, and yet, according to the government's own data, this came straight out of Illinois State Board of Education data, not one child in this school was proficient in either reading or math on the government's own standardized tests. How they graduated without even basic proficiency is a mystery. They spent $4,000 more per victim to achieve these supposedly wonderful results. And turns out almost 80% of students were chronically absent at the academy. So yeah, let's do more of that, right? I mean, you can't make this stuff up, folks. It's truly insane. Now, also in Illinois, they have a new mandate. All children starting in 3rd grade every year must have mandatory mental health testing. That's under a new law signed into law by far-left Governor J.B. Pritzker. They want all government schools to do mental testing on every student every year. And Big Pharma is, of course, grinning from ear to ear. One of the biggest financiers of political campaigns, financed the vast majority of all the state legislators who voted for this. And folks, it is totalitarian to the core. They want to know everything about what's going on in your child's mind, and they are not playing around at all. Folks, before we go to break, I do want to encourage you to check out our friends over at Classical Conversations. It is the nation's largest, and in my opinion, the nation's best homeschool program. That's why I enroll my own children there. You can find out more at classicalconversations.com. They've got 135,000 students across the U.S. and around the world. 1 day a week, you meet with a local community of fellow believers, fellow homeschoolers, and everybody works together and then at home for the other 4 days. It is truly such a joy, and I do want to encourage you to check it out, classicalconversations.com/LSM. Stay with us. We're going to be back with huge interview with senior fellow at the Mises Institute, Mark Thornton, breaking down the latest news on the battle between the Federal Reserve and Donald Trump right here on the Sentinel Report.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Folks, thanks so much for staying with us over the break. A lot is going on in the economics world. And for me, one of the most important things is what appears to be a looming war between the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve, especially the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. It's gotten more and more intense in recent days. Trump is, I guess, hoping that they will reduce interest rates. Jerome Powell is standing firm. And I mean, that has huge implications. I think people don't really think about the Federal Reserve as much as they should. It is, I say, one of the most powerful institutions in the world, and also one of the least understood institutions in the world. Joining us now to discuss is Mark Thornton. He is a senior fellow at the Mises Institute. I believe the best free market think tank in the world. Of course, it's named after Ludwig von Mises, the legendary Austrian economist. Incredible individual. Mark is also a podcast host. He has 2 of his own podcasts. He was the Peterson Luddy Chair in Austrian Economics from 2021 to 23 at the Mises Institute. And he has done a lot of work in various areas. He's the book review editor of the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. He's got a lot of publications under his belt dealing with economics. And he also is the editor of the Austrian Economics newsletter, and he's a member of the editorial board for the Journal of Libertarian Studies, among many other things. Mark, welcome to the program. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Alex, it's great to be with you. Economics is job number 1 these days.
Yep, and I taught it for 12 years, so I've got my own personal fondness for economics. And I use, of course, a lot of the Mises Institute resources because you guys just put out great stuff and you make it available for free. Can't thank you enough for that. Mark, what do we make of this ongoing dispute between Trump and the Federal Reserve? What do you suppose it means, and how seriously should we be taking it?
Well, it's always good to see them at war with one another. It's always good to see the Federal Reserve under the spotlight. And this week, the Federal Reserve officials and central bankers from all over the world are meeting out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which started out as a sleepy little conference for the Kansas City Fed. And now it's the big meeting place, the seminal conference on monetary policy reserved for the leading central bankers of the world, including Jerome Powell of the Fed and the elite business media of the world as well. So we should see some things coming out of that conference, I think.
Yeah, so what do you expect out of that conference? I wish people paid more attention to it. I remember back in 2019, right before the COVID lockdown, crazy stuff that we went through, they had a meeting where they talked about these obscure things that nobody pays any attention to, including like direct to consumer, where they were going to start pumping money directly into the economy. Like that seems pretty important. What do you think they're up to? I think they realize they're under some pressure, but what do you think they're planning? I know the media is speculating. Are we going to say rate increases, rate decreases? Where do you think this is all going? What does it mean?
Well, I don't think the papers that are presented at the conference they're basically meaningless. And I think it's really the side conversations that take place. After all, central bankers don't get a chance to talk to each other off the record very often. And that's why people are very suspicious. The fact that you have to have an invitation, you have to be a member of the global elite, the Ivy League, and so forth, in order to get into the conference. So they're plotting a coordinated strategy to deal with the likes of Trump and other forces around the globe that are opposed to the inflationism that central banks, threaten the general population with. And I think what their general plan is to try to do as little as possible until an economic crisis finally emerges in the economy, where they can come in and see to be the sort of the saving grace, the outside cure-all for everybody's problems. Right now, we have tremendous problems with government spending, government debt. Uh, Price inflation is still high. Labor markets are under stress. College students are having a hard time finding a job. And so there's lots of looming problems, but they want to be seen as coming in and curing a big macroeconomic problem. So they'll want to sit on their hands, maybe have a small rate cut here to try to smooth over the situation until there's a critical need.
Do you think we're headed to an economic crisis in light of what we already know?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in markets right now. There's a lot of not really uncertainty among American investors, but we've had a bull market in the U.S. stock markets since 2009. The leading indexes have gone up by a factor of 16. The S&P 500, the Nasdaq has gone up tremendously over that time. And of course, so we've had this long, very drawn out bull market. And through much of that time, we had ultra low interest rates and we had a tremendous fiscal stimulus from the federal government deficits. So if you took away those deficits, the economy would go rapidly into a GDP crisis. If you allowed interest rates to rise, or especially if long-term interest rates were to even move up slightly from its current point, you'd see big problems with refinancing the U.S. Government debt, and you'd see significant problems in the commercial real estate market. There's trillions of dollars of commercial real estate loans that have to be rolled over in 2005, 2006, and 2007. And a lot of that was papered over by regulators during the Biden administration. And the current administration is not allowing them to be papered over. And so, the anticipation was to find new lenders to finance that longer term real estate debt. And under the current circumstances, or if they got slightly worse in terms of real estate loans, that would be trouble. And we're seeing trouble in the residential housing market as well. So we have emerging trouble in the labor market, emerging trouble in the real estate market. So the stage is set. The boom has been underway for a very long time. And so the conditions are, yes, ripe for a downturn and possibly a significant economic crisis. And of course, the price of gold is close to $3,500 an ounce, and the price of gold rises significantly. I did a study on this, and those things happen during periods of relative monetary chaos. And so that means we're in a period right now of relative monetary chaos, which I think everybody would agree that that's probably the case. And that's what really worries those central bankers who are just now arriving out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Well, we're running out of time quickly. I've got so many things I want to ask you, but let's continue with this crisis issue for a minute here. If we do have problems in the commercial real estate, residential real estate, stock market, I mean, it looks like we have bubbles, and at the same time, we're still seeing inflation. Are we talking about another maybe example of stagflation, like we've seen before, where prices for things consumers need are rising, but asset prices are going down?
Yes, and I think there's been a lot of talk about stagflation, or even stagflation is a term that's been recently coined to indicate high levels of inflation with high levels of unemployment. Right now, that's not the case, but there is pressure in the CPI statistics, as noted in the recent producer price index that came in much higher than expected. And of course, the business commentators don't understand the impact of tariffs, the fact that people try to rush their goods across the border before the tariffs go into place, and then they try to pass the cost of the tariffs on, and then there's a cutback, and so it's very slow to work into the consumer price index statistics. But yes, there is upward inflation pressures in the economy, and there is concerns, and I think you'll see this expressed by Powell at the end of the Jackson Hole, Wyoming conference, that he is keeping his eye on and is looking at concerns that he and the other Fed officials have with respect to the American labor market. So, yes, it's definitely on the table. Yes, it's definitely something we want to keep an eye on. And yes, I think that is going to be the side conversation at the Jackson Hole conference.
Wow. And so, turning briefly to solutions, I spoke with Roger Stone last week for a different show I do for the New American Magazine, and he told me on the record that Donald Trump supports the repeal of the Federal Reserve Act. Now, Stone has been close to Trump going back to the '80s, a close friend, confidant, advisor, and that strikes me as pretty significant. What do you think? Do you think Donald Trump might be willing to entertain the idea of pretty drastic reforms like that and enable the U.S. economy to rebuild on a solid foundation in the aftermath of a crisis?
I think he has good instincts on gold, good instincts on getting rid of the Fed. He grew up when the United States was on the gold standard. We didn't face any of these problems. The national debt and the deficits were under control in his early years. And so he doesn't understand all of the connections and all of the mechanisms, but I think he has very good instincts. And I think a lot of other people are thinking, hey, gold is probably a better base for the monetary system of the United States and the world. So I'm hopeful. And of course, economic crises do require, in many cases, significant policy reforms, and we're long overdue for a positive reform of monetary policy here in the United States. I point out that Jackson Hole was named after Davy Jackson, a fur trapper in Wyoming during the 1820s, but further east in the 1830s, President Andy Jackson, when he was president of the United States, he did away with the central bank in the United States, and America went on for three consecutive decades of unprecedented economic prosperity and growth. It really was the sweet spot, economically speaking, in all of American history. So I don't think the central bankers in Jackson Hole will be talking about President Andy Jackson.
Right. Well, I want to get back to this issue of ending the Fed, but before we move to that, Trump has been negotiating a lot of these bilateral trade agreements. The recent huge one that came in was with the European Union. It looks like now the Europeans are going to have to start paying a little bit when they ship goods to the United States through these tariffs, allow the government to raise some revenue. I know none of you guys at the Mises Institute are very fond of tariffs or even restrictions on trade at all, but what do you make of this? Is this balancing the scales a little bit? What do we make of this agreement?
I would say it's a great relief that the way the EU deal turned out in terms of the tariff level, it wasn't 25 or 35%, it was 15%. There were some concessions about opening European markets to American producers of food products and energy products. There was a commitment on the part of the Europeans for more business investment in the United States, something that they want to do anyways. The Europeans want to invest in the United States, and they have been investing in the United States for our entire history. So they want to continue that. They're making promises about buying more agricultural products and more manufactured goods as well, military goods as well. Going into it, I was very afraid about what might come out of all this. But so far, so good. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of details that have yet to be worked out. The non-tariff barriers, for example, to American products in the United States is something that they promised to work on. That's really not too good. And of course, the members of the European Union still have to ratify this agreement. So there's still a lot of things up in the air, but things could have turned out as bad for European and American trade, which where the European Union is the #1 trading partner with the United States. So yes, this is significant. It's not just German automobiles and chocolate. It's much, much more than that, that Americans depend on and Americans benefit from buying from Europe. And likewise, Europeans benefit from buying American products. But there's a lot yet to be worked out. And hopefully there's a lot of products where the tariffs won't apply at all. They said that a bottle of Italian and French wine could increase by as much as $4 or $5 a bottle, but they said that is still in the negotiating stage. That's one example of many things that have yet to be worked out in the agreement. So we're keeping an eye on it. But so far, I'm relieved that we're not in the position of Switzerland, which I think was made an example of. If you Europeans didn't agree, this is what Donald Trump would have done, which was to slap a 39% tariff on virtually everything. And that's very ruinous for the Swiss economy and also trade between Switzerland and the United States. It's now going to be cheaper for Americans to fly to Switzerland, stay for 4 or 5 days in a fairly expensive hotel in order to buy one of those very expensive Swiss watches. You'll actually get it at a lower price than if you tried to bring the watch through the tariff into the United States and pay the tariff. It would have cost Americans much, much more for that same watch. So, and of course, we also expect smuggling of various sorts as a result of that with the smaller goods. So we avoided that catastrophe. There's a lot of things yet to be decided upon, but I'm relieved by the current state of the deal.
Excellent. Mark Thornton with the Mises Institute, Mises.org. And then you have 2 podcasts, Minor Issues, and then also Unanimity. How do people find those?
Yeah, Minor Issues is available on Mises.org, MISES.org, and you can just, Google Minor Issues, MINOR, and there it is right there, stuck in Jackson Hole. And I come out Saturday morning at 6 o'clock with a new episode every week. The Unanimity podcast is an irregular monthly podcast, and it's a longer form podcast that gets into an issue that tries to bring people together, make them see the common interest that people have in certain issues. Minor Issues is only an 8 to 10 minute long condensed podcast, so that there's no long discussions and intimate details, but just the key things of issues or angles on issues that is not being covered elsewhere in the media.
Excellent. Mark Thornton, Senior Fellow at the Mises Institute. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I look forward to being back with you.
Thank you so much, Mark. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back after this quick break with our sponsors with much more.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Folks, you're about to start hearing a whole lot more about the new Apostolic Reformation, also known as the NAR. In fact, not long ago, I was accused by a guy with a YouTube channel of being involved with the NAR. I am not, of course, but the leader, or one of the key leaders of the NAR, is about to run for governor of California. And the politics to these folks is generally pretty conservative. But my friend and host of Church and State, Caleb Collier, has done a deep dive into this and has some really interesting findings. Caleb, welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure to see you. Cheon, this is going to be an interesting race for governor of California. Not being prophetic at all, but I will go out and say he's probably not going to win. You can take that for what you will. But yeah, it'll be an interesting race.
Yeah, California
exactly.
is overwhelmingly Democratic. I had a friend tell me, I won't mention his name because he wasn't speaking on the record, but he said Cheon is probably not running so much for governor of California as he is for governor of American evangelicalism. Because, of course, he and his team know that they're not going to win in the Golden State, so-called. So let's start. Most people, I think, who are watching us right now, Caleb, don't know much about the NAR, might have heard about it here and there. What is the NAR? Where do we start?
Yeah, so the New Apostolic Reformation, otherwise known as NAR or NAR, it's a modern heresy. And what it is, I mean, people are probably familiar with the Word of Faith and the Prosperity Gospel. This is that on steroids. It really gets its root from an individual by the name of C. Peter Wagner. And they operate under this assumption that, they kind of misconstrue the fivefold ministry, which is found in Ephesians 4:11. Where they've established almost a hierarchy there, where they have the apostles, the prophets, and these two are the biggest deal in the NAR circles. The apostle is the biggest, and you could almost, if you're going to look at it like in a military structure, it's almost like he's the general, followed by the colonel, who is the prophet, and the other three are lesser officers. These individuals, the apostle and the prophet, they're hearing new words, new revelations from the Lord. And what they want is everyone to submit to their new revelations. Now, for somebody like you and I, Alex, we believe the scripture is sufficient and we don't need additions to that. In fact, throughout history, when we find modern cults that arise, it's always some new revelation, some new scripture. And this is how we've gotten Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the list goes on to the more extreme ones, more dangerous ones like the Jim Jones cult. So it's a really dangerous heresy that the church really needs to start policing.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Caleb, is that there are some of these folks who are not even Trinitarians. I mean, they don't believe the doctrine of the Trinity, which is, of course, one of the most fundamental doctrines of Christianity. And there are other groups that also reject that, but certainly outside of the mainstream of Christianity, even if you bring in, Catholicism and Greek Orthodoxy, I mean, the Trinity is just kind of basic, mainstream, all Christians kind of agree on that. Where is the NAR on that issue?
Yeah, so that one is, and what you're kind of pointing to is that oneness Pentecostalism, which NAR is very, very popular in the more Pentecostal charismatic circles. But there is within the NAR, and it's kind of hard because there's no like direct leadership of NAR. There's no like NAR church specifically. But a lot of them do believe in the Trinity. Some do not. I mean, Elevation, for example, with Stephen Furtick, he's got a lot of NAR associations, and he's part of that oneness Pentecostalism, even though he says he's not. So it's kind of a mixed bag on there as far as if they believe in the Trinity or not. But one of the more dangerous teachings that many of them believe is what's called the manifest sons of God. And with that, they actually believe that man, specifically these prophets and apostles, will achieve a level to where they actually become God-like. And that, without a doubt, is most certainly heresy.
Wow. And I mean, a lot of people will say, hey, they agree with us politically. They're with us on a lot of doctrinal issues. Can't we just work together to save California? Can't we just work? And what do you say? I don't know the answer to that, but what do you say? Can regular Bible believing evangelicals work with NAR on political projects? Service projects. What do you say?
Well, and this is the root of it, Alex, is it's so attractive to even individuals such as you and I, those of us who are Christian, but we love our country, we love the Constitution, and we've been beating our heads against the wall trying to figure out ways to get Christians to engage civically. Well, enter in the NAR, and this is so like Satan, right? Is a positive idea of getting Christians to engage in our country and our Constitution and defending it, but taking it and making it into a heresy where it's actually leading people astray, leading people away from the Lord. But this is why politically you're starting to see this as a massive movement. When you have individuals like Bill Johnson and Cheon and Lance Walno, all these individuals who are buddying up with people that are in the political theater, yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. And so as Christians, I think we need to be really, really careful here as we start linking up with these NAR people. Granted, yes. Does it seem like a lofty goal at the world level? Sure. Do you want people to engage in politics and education and religion and family, which are some of those 7 mountain mandates that they really operate under? But at what cost? And so I'll once again say one of the more important things we need to be doing as Christians and as patriots is to police our own and to call out the New Apostolic Reformation for exactly what it is.
Well, fascinating, Caleb. A friend of mine told me to get the book Counterfeit Kingdom. I have not had an opportunity to read it yet, but I know it deals with this subject. And folks, it's going to become a bigger issue in the months ahead, so it can't hurt to learn a little bit about it now. Caleb, thank you very much for joining us. So what's the best way for people to listen to your excellent program, Church and State?
Yeah, and we've actually done a number of series on this. We call it the NAR Wars instead of Star Wars. So if you want to go over to churchandstate.media, you can see all of the different shows that we continually provide. It's on 5 days a week, but we have dived into this quite a bit. And if you're interested, you can just email us at churchandstate1776@proton.me, and I can send you all of the content that we produced for this.
Excellent. Hey, Caleb, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, sir. And we'll talk to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
Have a good one. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back with some comments from Congressman Warren Davidson, representing the state of Ohio, in just a moment.
Introducing PerformLyte. PerformLyte helps support your body's performance from within. This plant-powered electrolyte drink helps you be the power plant that you are meant to be. Unlike most electrolyte products in the market, PerformLyte is more than just a sodium, potassium, or magnesium-containing electrolyte formula. It is bioenergetic nutrition. PerformLyte has a full spectrum of minerals derived from pure, natural seawater, so the balance of electrolytes in PerformLyte is the same that exists in the body, making the nutrient load more bioavailable. In addition, PerformLyte contains a blend of 31 powerhouse vegetable and fruit concentrates and herbal extracts rich in bioflavonoids and antioxidants to enhance energy and oxygen utilization naturally without stimulants or sugar. And of course, PerformLyte is powered by VNI's proteasome technology for rapid and sustained absorption of its nutrient payload. Better absorbed minerals means more electrolytes to promote the essential electrical functions of cells in your body. Unlock the power of your mitochondria. Harness the energy of your cells. This is nutrition that gets in and energy that comes out. Feel the energy. Be the energy with PerformLyte.
Folks, the Federal Reserve is in the news a lot. Donald Trump is trying to get them to lower interest rates. Jerome Powell has been in the news for his building projects and other reasons recently. And there's a lot of interest in Congress now in doing something about it. One of the individuals who's involved in this process is Congressman Warren Davidson. He represents the 8th District in the state of Ohio. And he's got a number of bills that he's working on this front to either rein in the powers of the Federal Reserve, audit the Federal Reserve, or even reform in some very important respects this institution. And a lot of other bills he's working on as well to end the liability protections for vaccine manufacturers, some of the PrEP Act protections for some of these manufacturers. And he's also got an incredibly interesting bill to have the government research Trump derangement syndrome. So Congressman Warren Davidson joins us today to discuss all this and more. Congressman, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me. I look forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you joining. So you've got 4 bills right now, at least, that you are either sponsoring or co-sponsoring dealing with the Federal Reserve. You've got the one, this is a big one, Prohibition on IOER Act of 2025. That's H.R. 146. As I understand it, it would basically prohibit the Federal Reserve from paying interest to these banks when they're keeping excess reserves at the Federal Reserve. Talk to us about this. Why do you think it's important?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 variations on this. Prior to 07, the Federal Reserve wasn't allowed to pay banks direct interest. So banks, of course, had required reserves since we've had banks. But let's say a bank was, by size, required to hold $1 billion worth of reserves. They had to manage their own balance sheet. They would go into the market and buy treasuries. They would put it in other investments, but they had to have immediately liquid reserves, short-term treasuries, to cover the required reserves or cash. Now they just leave it in deposit with the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve manages that. And initially they only managed it for required reserves, but now they've increased it all the way up to any amount of money that that a bank wants to leave at the Federal Reserve, they get interest on. And when interest was really low, 50 basis points, 0.5%, there wasn't a ton of excess reserves being left at the Fed. But now Federal Reserve's paying like 4.4% on these master accounts, and so you have banks that are making more money than hedge funds make for management fees. So they don't have to do any underwriting or anything else. And that's why it's so important, because banks essentially are incentivized not to deploy capital into the market. And so you've seen this massive rise of non-bank lenders because banks aren't really doing the work of banks.
Wow. And you've got another bill that you've co-sponsored. We've talked about it on this program before, then we've interviewed some of the other members who have supported it. The bill to audit the Federal Reserve. Why do you think it needs to be audited? I mean, it may sound like a dumb question, but I mean, we can't trust the Fed to police itself?
We definitely can't trust the Fed to police itself. And look, if all men were angels, we wouldn't need government, frankly, right? But we do. And just because they're part of the government doesn't mean that they're somehow angelic, as we've seen through any number of instances in history. The Federal Reserve should have clear accountability. If we're going to have a central bank, it should be accountable to somebody. But they want to be completely autonomous and essentially exist in this sort of world where they're sort of federal but sort of private, and they're accountable but they're not. And that's where the audit is so essential. You find out exactly what they've been doing with their money. I mean, prior to 08, the Federal Reserve's total assets were under $1 trillion, about $800 billion. But if you look at managing the COVID crisis and everything else, during that run-up between the 08 financial crisis and now, the balance sheet grew to over $9 trillion. And still over $8 trillion. What exactly do they hold? How do they hold it? What kinds of things are they doing with it? When you look at their, Secretary Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, recently said that they've essentially become universal basic income for PhD economists. And that's because they employ a massive number of them and they still don't get things right.
Wow, that is a funny way of putting it, and I've heard that myself. Amazing. Well, Congressman Ron Paul, who was one of the big supporters of the audit the Fed bill back when he was in Congress, I think he left a little over a decade ago, he always said that if and when the American people figured out what the Federal Reserve was doing with their money, there would be such national outrage that there'd even be a push to end the Fed. Do you think it's that bad? Yeah,
I mean, it might be the point where this Fed we might need to get rid of and just start over again with a different form of central bank. At one point when I was talking with Jerome Powell, he was still saying that all this massive spending while closing the economy wasn't going to cause inflation. And then he later said, well, it'll be transitory, right? Well, I was talking with him privately, and he said, "Well, what are we going to do? Not cover for you?" And I'm like, "Yes, that would be exactly the role of an independent bank. An independent central bank would say, yeah, we're going to set rates based on a market metric. We're going to have sound money, and we're not going to automatically cover for unlimited deficits. And certainly, you wouldn't expect an independent central bank to call for more fiscal spending in light of the fact that you're already doing so much is going to cause massive inflation. So they've missed the mark so badly, and then they want no accountability. So they may not be fixable in the first place, but the audit should occur. And the other thing is, another bill I've got is to basically end their regulatory approach. The central bank's supposed to deal with monetary policy, but they've also claimed for themselves all this responsibility for being bank regulators. And they impose all sorts of things with very little accountability. So even when Congress wants to shape the role of bank regulation, the Fed kind of sees themselves as this autonomous agency. They don't steer at all, and they're not on appropriations. They just make money from operating the central bank.
Yeah. And I've noticed every time a Republican says anything about the Federal Reserve, it's, oh, you're trying to politicize the Federal Reserve. And yet just a few years ago, the Democrats ordered the Federal Reserve to focus on racial and ethnic disparities and to invest in equity. I know you were very critical of that at the time. You blasted it as politicization of the Federal Reserve. What do you think about the Federal Reserve kind of entering into all these phrase, cultural, political, racial discussions?
Yeah, I mean, that's the drift, and that's basically using their coercive power as bank regulators. If you completely take away that power, there's nothing for them to politicize. And then, you could still say, well, as central banks, they could do whatever. Look, their job is essentially to preserve sound money. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. All they have to do is not mess it up. And the key to that is, stable prices and the use of the dollar as an efficient means of exchange. So they should be, jealously guarding the power of the dollar. And instead, they're engaged in all kinds of other activities. And perhaps one of the most politicized parts of the Federal Reserve System was the San Francisco Fed. And, of course, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, where they were supposed to be getting oversight from the San Francisco Fed. So as a bank regulator, they continually fail, and still there's no accountability for the Fed.
Yeah. You mentioned something really important. A couple of years ago, I spoke with Congressman Alex Newman. He had a bill to restore the gold standard. And one of the big concerns he expressed was that the Federal Reserve was recklessly endangering the dollar's status as a global reserve. He warned that hostile actors, especially the Communist Chinese Party, were looking at this as maybe an opportunity to come in and undermine the dollar. And, of course, the Fed wasn't helping. Do you have concerns about the long-term viability of the U.S. dollar if the spending doesn't come under control and the Federal Reserve doesn't stop?
Yeah, I formed the Sound Money Caucus back in July of 2020 because to me it was obvious if you close the planet's economy and then your response is just to print money, you're going to cause inflation. You're debasing the currency, devaluing it. And so, people look with, the first thing that happens with inflation is you inflate the money supply. And that happened, very swiftly. And then it flows through to asset prices. And so a lot of people with assets, if they own their own home or they have stocks and retirement savings, they feel like inflation isn't so bad initially because the assets are getting inflated too, and it's not really that your house is worth more, it's your money's worth less. And we've seen that eventually show up on consumer prices. And that's the part where Powell said, well, it's going to be transitory. Well, in the sense that life is but a vapor, isn't everything transitory? But the reality is this is pretty enduring, and you don't generally see deflation where prices go back down to the previous price level. And so people without assets, they don't have a way to adapt. If you think about housing, in 2008, we called it a housing bubble when the median home was 3.8 times the median income, because usually financial advisors say don't spend more than 3 times your annual income on a house. Well, right now, the national average is roughly 6 times, like 5.8 times the median income. So it is a crisis. Without 2 incomes, the average person can't afford a home. And this is a crisis. So, that's a function of devaluing the money. And we've seen it up in gas and groceries and everything else. Inflation is maybe the most dishonest tax. And that's what's happened when you're destroying the money.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there are people on Capitol Hill who are thinking about these things, because a lot of us little people out here, we feel the pain, but it doesn't always seem like Washington is paying attention. Shifting gears a little bit, Congressman, you co-sponsored a bill to make American elections great again by requiring the census to only count citizens. Trump obviously is moving on this front, just made a big announcement just a few days ago. We had Tom Homan on this program last year, and he actually argued that one of the main reasons the Democrats had the borders wide open is because they wanted to increase their representation in Congress by having sanctuary states in California and New York. Why is this so important, this issue of counting only citizens? And how do you address the objections from the Democrats that this dehumanizes non-citizens by not counting them?
Well, look, I'm a member of Congress. I only represent U.S. citizens. If you're not a citizen, you're represented at an embassy or a consulate, not at the United States Capitol. I mean, if we took a job in, the United Kingdom or France or something, we wouldn't feel like we had representation there. We would go to the American embassy. And we're the only country foolish enough to view that, since you're here, you go see your member of Congress. And we're going to draw the maps based on that. I mean, that's insane. And that's exactly what we're doing. And not just people that are here illegally, even legally, you're counting every person that's here at some level, even tourists are counting. We also do that with birthright citizenship. So I've tried to counter all these since I've been in Congress. I even introduced a constitutional amendment early on to try to shape the census so that in 2020 we would get an honest census. You can't really have an honest census, an honest election if you don't have an honest census, because the way the congressional maps are drawn are based on these census counts. And if you don't differentiate who's a citizen and who isn't, you give extra representation to places that have lots of non-citizens. So California, people think they have 6 or 7 extra seats because of that. And it's not just anywhere, it's skewed towards sanctuary cities. So they're overstating their population. They're getting more representation in Congress because of it. And okay, fair enough, Texas is getting extra seats too. But states like Ohio that, we have some illegal population, some non-citizen population, but as a percentage, a much smaller portion than some of our border states. So you're really denying representation to American citizens and, frankly, not even adequately representing foreigners because, again, they're supposed to be represented by their embassies.
Say hello to Trimrocks by V&I, a playful and popping way to boost metabolism and mood, burn belly fat, and balance your systems. Pop some Trimrocks. Feel the fizz, feel the fun, feel the rush, feel the focus, feel the burn. A daily dose of metabolic nutrition in confection form. V&I's metabolic complex is as efficacious as it is effervescent. Made with our blend of proprietary ingredients that have been clinically proven to increase fat burn, reduce abdominal and arm fat, reduce waist and hip measurements, boost metabolism, mood, and immunity, improve endurance, and reduce stress, to name a few. Trimrocks is a holistic and happy way to support your metabolism. And because it is from V&I, you know that it has been protozoan for optimal absorption, delivering this stellar nutritional payload in a playful way that you will look forward to ripping and roxing every day. Rocks your way to trimmer, slimmer, vim, and vigor. Nutrition packed, science backed, benefit stacked. V&I, we will rox you.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Folks, we've talked a lot about the Federal Reserve here lately. I've been talking a lot about the Federal Reserve for my entire career in journalism. It's one of the most powerful institutions and one of the least understood institutions in the world. And I mean that with no exaggeration at all. It's unbelievably powerful. It basically holds your economic future in its hands. And yet nobody knows what's going on there exactly. There's no real audits happening there. We know that the current head is not in Trump's good graces, I think for obvious reasons. Very much looks like they are working with Democrats to try to impose economic pain on Americans. Joining us now to discuss is one of our partners. His name is Bill Armour. He's a director at Genesis Gold Group, one of our partners here at the Sentinel Report. We appreciate them very much. Bill, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So talk to us about this apparent conspiracy between Jerome Powell and the Democrats. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And why are they doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, apparent. I wouldn't even say apparent at this point. I think it's, it smells like it looks like it probably is. So, at this point, I think it's apparent. It is reality that he is working alongside, deep state, Democrats, etc., to sabotage America's recovery from the previous Biden regime. And the way that they're accomplishing that is by keeping rates high. And that's doing a myriad of different things. I mean, you can look at even just housing is one of the things that I think is really apparent. Americans can't buy houses, right? They can't afford to go out and get a loan at 6-7%, et cetera, and buy a home, so they're forced to continue renting, which people sit around, they get upset about that. And I do believe that there's a long-term plan here to start drawing into, continue to make Americans upset, and hopefully they can win back in midterms, Democrats, I mean. But I think it's clear as day.
Wow. Yeah, you wonder what they're doing, and really nobody knows. As Congressman Davidson told us, there's no real audit there, and incredibly, the Federal Reserve continues to push back on legislation that would require an audit, and it makes you wonder. They always say to us, "Well, if you have nothing to hide, what are you so worried about?" Well, if you got nothing to hide, why can't we open up the books? Why can't we know what you're doing? You literally create money out of nothing. Bill, I know you guys focus a lot on the scriptures. What does the scripture have to say about kind of these unelected powers, the dishonest weights and measures? I mean, it seems like there's quite a few Bible lessons that are applicable to what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you just alluded to Proverbs 20:10 there, unequal weights and measures. The Lord hates unequal weights and measures. And what that's referring to is historically they would weight the scales, heavy in one way so that when they were balancing out for trade, that someone would gain, when they really weren't supposed to. And that's what you see with the Federal Reserve is, and I would make a very good contention. I don't think you can really argue with the data on this, that the Federal Reserve is committing and has committed the greatest theft of American wealth since its inception in history. And the way that they accomplish that, for viewers who may not understand that, is that when you have, let's say you have $1 and they create 10 new dollars, you haven't lost your dollar is still there. But by creating 10 new ones out of thin air, your value of that dollar has shrunk. And so over time, as they continue to repeat this over and over again, they are slowly siphoning away your wealth, and no one's the wiser. It is the greatest theft, make no mistake, the greatest theft in American history.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at the value of $1 today relative to where it was when the Federal Reserve was born, it's astounding. I mean, it's lost over 99% of its purchasing power. Where did it all go? Right? Inquiring minds would like to know. It really is crazy. I did talk to Roger Stone last week, and he shared that Donald Trump is in favor of repealing the Federal Reserve Act, which I think would be a really, really nice gesture. Let's hope we see something like that. But it looks to me, Bill, that we're actually seeing financial warfare being waged against Americans. I mean, this to me looks like a war on our finances, on our economy, on our jobs, on the middle class. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. So it's part of the playbook here, that the globalist playbook of, as they continue to drive prices up, steal wealth, force you into renting as opposed to buying. You can't even rent for, take money to start a business. This is designed to keep people working menial jobs, to keep them owning nothing, and eventually it's a form of enslavement, I would argue. And this is one of the ways they accomplish it. The Federal Reserve is one of the greatest tools, and it is used liberally in order to accomplish these goals.
Yep, it's scary how much power they have, and I mean, folks, you ignore the TV commentators. I mean, the situation really is getting dire. If you look objectively at the economic data that we're seeing, it's very troubling. What do you see coming on the broader economy? I mean, what are we going to see in housing and equities? What are we going to see in small businesses? Obviously, the federal debt is just astounding. I know we just hit officially $37 trillion. We reported last week the Treasury revealed that we've got over $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Where does this all go?
Well, it can't go on forever. $37 trillion in national debt, for instance. These numbers aren't human. They're almost made up. You can't fathom the depth or scope or width of these numbers. So what that means, though, $37 trillion for framing on this, is the interest on that national debt has ballooned to be the largest single line item for the national expenditure. So we are spending more. And I think if anyone put that in the idea of their own finances, it would really shock them. Is imagine if you spent more of your money on your credit card interest than you did on your mortgage payment. I mean, it would be, you'd be like, well, this is unsustainable. You'd have to declare bankruptcy. And that's where we exist, right? That's where we exist at this point in history. Is our country, the only logical explanation is that we declare bankruptcy, or, we abolish the Federal Reserve, as Donald Trump is talking about, to stop this, because it is, as we've alluded to already, an orchestrated attack here on the American people.
Yeah, very, very concerning. Now, we have seen gold hit record highs. We're seeing silver really performing well. We're seeing cryptocurrencies doing very, very well. Just hit some new record highs, almost 125 on Bitcoin. Just massive, massive growth in some asset classes. What do you say? I mean, how do Americans protect themselves from this very strange situation we find ourselves in, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is, what do you have that they can't steal from you effectively, right? I mean, when you have things, equities, dollars, etc., these all range into the scope of what can be attacked through financial warfare, as we spoke about. So when you talk about tangibles, physical gold and silver, for instance, these are assets that are going to be immune to that. They really are the counterbalance. If they're stealing money from your bank account effectively by printing more money, you're actually counteracting that and improving your position by owning tangibles. So it really is the inoculation against that. I mean, we saw even back in 2008, right, when the market crashed and people lost 50+% of their savings that was in the market. What was the one asset that really shined? It was gold and silver. You saw 100-200% returns on gold and silver, depending on when exactly you got in. But you were able to not only come out of that recession not losing, but you actually made money through the 2008 crash, when a lot of people lost their houses, had to go back to work for another 10+ years instead of retiring. So it really is, and I have a saying that was told to me when I was in the Army, and that is, you're either early or you're late. There's no in between. You're never on time. And so I talk to people about this and say, you're either in at 2007 or you're in at 2009. No one was in right at 2008.
Yeah. And, full disclosure for the folks out there, I'm heavily invested in gold, silver miners, other tangibles, agricultural land. That's kind of where I've been putting our little meager savings, because I don't trust the stock market. I certainly don't trust the dollar anymore. In fact, at this point, I can't imagine who would. Lending the U.S. government money at 4.5% interest, the largest debtor in the history of mankind, just strikes me as a very foolish idea. So, full disclosure, that's where I have been putting our little bit of meager savings. Bill, really appreciate you coming on. People can learn more. They can get in touch with you guys at goldwithalexnewman.com, goldwithalexnewman.com. And there's also a phone number that they can call. Do you happen to remember that off the top of your head, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 1-800-200-GOLD. Again, that's 1-800-200-GOLD. You can speak to someone. You can ask for Bill. You can speak to someone on the team. We'll be happy to diagnose if this is something we can help you with. That's 401ks, IRAs, even just a cash purchase. It's worth investigating, because you really don't know how quickly this can unfold.
Yeah, and I've purchased gold from you guys and silver from you guys, and you've always done me right, so really appreciate it. Bill, director with Genesis Gold Group, Bill Armour, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your insights. I hope we can talk to you again very soon, Bill.
Looking forward to it. God bless.
God bless you too. Thanks so much. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back after this short break from with our sponsors right here on the Sentinel Report. Well, that's all we have for you today, folks. I do want to encourage you, check out our friends and our partners, especially those over at Genesis Gold, and also get to our website, libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You can sign up for our free newsletter there. You can get plugged into so much that's going on. Go check it out, libertysentinel.org. Thanks for tuning in today. We really appreciate it, whether you're listening to us on TV, radio, podcast, YouTube, whatever it is, Rumble. We appreciate your support. Thank you, and God willing, we shall see you again soon. Until then, thanks for listening. God bless you all.